Hi there, welcome to this week's Record Rangers podcast, brought to you by NordVPN, ideal for watching all your sporting occasions while protecting your private data. I'm your host today, Douglas Dickie, and I'm joined by two of the greatest minds in Scottish football, but they appear to have nipped out right now, so we'll need Andy Newport and Scott McDermott. And
That's harsh, by the way. That's really harsh. Come on. Not even kicked off yet. We're getting two-footed tackles here, Scott. What's going on?
I know the bants is flowing. What can I say? But obviously, I'm in a good mood after Rangers chewed up some jam tarts and spat them out on Sunday. It was a great atmosphere at Ibrox as Rangers beat Hearts 4-2 in the top of the table clash. Reduces the deficit to 2 points. That's the kind of main thing, the main takeaway from it. It came just a few days after an equally as disappointing day against Motherwell. I think Danny Rohl was rightly criticised in my eyes for his team selection and game management at Fir Park. And I think it kind of left a lot of Rangers fans doubting that this team had the minerals, or the result itself, was never going to be fatal to the title hopes. It did, lead to some doubts creeping in. But I think, Scott, he definitely got it right on Sunday, the four new guys coming in, and Rangers looked like a team in a hurry.
He did, but I think you're right in what you're saying. I mean, it's still okay to criticise for the Fir Park selection and the Fir Park decisions, because I think he did get it wrong. I mean, Danny Rohl will argue that, I think he actually said after the game at Fir Park, he was looking at both of those games, and look, maybe behind closed doors, he's quite satisfied with the 4 points, given how Motherwell are doing. But I think he got big decisions wrong at Fir Park in terms of the team selection, as you say, game management in terms of the subs he brought on as well. It wasn't right, but it looked a lot better. Obviously, on Sunday, he got the team spot on. And listen, even at kickoff, I'll hold my hands up. I thought, as much as I was pleased to see Roman, Skov Olsen, Chukwani all in, Fernandez back as well for the start, obviously, I was still questioning why Chermiti was in the starting lineup. I was moaning to Andy in the press box why Chermiti was starting. I would have rather have seen him play Diomande midfield, Skov Olsen and Moore wide, obviously with Nadiri up top. But look, you have to say they've won the game, won it pretty convincingly in the end in terms of the second half performance. Obviously going with a kind of 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2 as Andy described it at the weekend. I'm sure he'll get into all the nuts and bolts of that.
We bit of that, Scott. We bit of that.
Aye. He got it right and they looked a lot better. It was I'm sure we'll go on to it. I mean, defensively it was still a wee bit ropey in the first half, but the 4 goals were excellent. I thought Romans, Chukwani, even Skov Olsen wasn't brilliant in the game, but he comes up with a brilliant assist for Chermiti's header, obviously. A big result for Rangers. I mean, it was absolutely, it was vital that they won that game for obvious reasons, and you have to say they produced and showed a wee bit of character. They're going behind twice to Hearts, coming back, going on and winning it pretty convincingly. So that was a big day for Danny Rohl.
Andy, I'll come on to the likes of Chermiti in a moment, but going back again even further than Motherwell, after the Kilmarnock game, Danny Rohl had spoken about being a bit surprised at the crowd reaction. Now, from my fans' point of view, I was very disappointed at half-time against Kilmarnock, and I felt like it's something of a chicken and egg situation. The fans have got to play their part, but the players have got to give us something to cheer. I think Ibrox responded on Sunday, and I think it would have been really easy for it to be flat, given events that just happened at Rugby Park. Do you think now we might see more of that towards the end of the season? I know Rangers are offering extra Gers points for turning up for the last kind of home games. Or obviously, there's a feeling in there that the fans have got a part to play. And how much do you think the atmosphere drove the players on?
Well, undoubtedly, the punters played their part on Saturday. I mean, I think you're right. The Kilmarnock game, I remember saying last week, I thought, Rangers have been bad in that game, but it wasn't booed off bad as far as I was concerned. And then, yeah, I mean, there has been a feeling that Ibrox hasn't been the kind of fortress, the kind of intimidating venue that, we all sort of remember it being. We remember the impact it had in, Gio Van Bronckhorst's team in the road to Seville. And, there was a feeling that the fans still weren't sure of this team, weren't sure if they fully trusted them to go the distance. But, I think Rohl was entirely right when he had not quite a pop at him, but, I might he was surprised by the anxiety that continues to feed in. Listen, the players have a duty themselves to lift the crowd, but the fans also have to play their part. And I remember sitting during the game and saying to Scott, wow, this is the loudest I've heard this place in a long, long time. Outside of an Old Firm game or a big European night, this was a proper atmosphere. The fans, and I thought what was key to it was that, especially the way that they lost the first goal, that was a kind of mistake. I remember a very similar thing happening back against Bruges in the Champions League qualifiers, and I can't remember who. I think it was Suter and Butland involved in it. They had a sort of mix-up, or maybe it was Giga. I can't quite call. Yeah, Giga, and that set the tone for the punters the whole night, because at that point they'd already seen enough of Russell Martin's team to decide that they weren't having it, and from then on for the remainder of the game, they were just in full on almost open revolt. And I think I remember saying on Hotline Live after that game that I didn't think Russell Martin would be for much longer. The only surprise was that he lasted about another 6 weeks after that. But I think it would have been easy for the fans to sort of slip back into that mode after the way that, Fernandes and Raskin getting into that really ridiculous sort of mix-up with Raskin turning his back and Fernandes giving him the ball when he wasn't looking, and obviously Hearts run up the park, and Mark Leonard scores a fantastic finish. I think it would be easy for the punters to go toe-on-toe with Franklin at that point, but they didn't. They stayed with the team. They even stayed with the team again when Braga scores a great header, gets himself up above John Suter to angle a header away from Jack Butland. And again, I think it would have been interesting to see what had happened if Rangers had gone into the break behind. But I think the fact that after both goals they hit back, almost immediately after the first goal, and within 5 or 6 minutes of the second goal, they got themselves level. They didn't really allow the anxiety to set into the play. And then the second half, I thought when Rangers really dominated, I thought the crowd really played their part. And then the noise when the fourth goal goes in is as loud as I can remember at Ibrox in a long, long time. I think the fans realised the significance of the result. The players celebrated it. They deservedly celebrated it. But I think as Danny Rohl was keen to point out that, this is the first time he's heard Ibrox like this, but Rangers and the fans need to maintain the levels they set at the weekend. Obviously they go to Livingston at the weekend. Rangers will have 3 sides of the ground there, but the Rangers have to keep marching forward. If not, if they slip up like they did again last week, I'm just not sure how many more opportunities or chances they'll get to get back into it. They are 2 points behind Hearts. Celtic, should they win their game in hand next month, that would, and obviously if they beat Rangers in the Old Firm game a few days before it, they would be level with Hearts. It's so tight, and Rangers really can't afford any more slip-ups. They have to be punch perfect or as close to it in the remaining 11 games of the season.
Yeah, I mean, from a fan's point of view, it was probably the best I can remember out with an Old Firm game, out with a European game, probably since Hibs back in December 2015 when we were in the Championship. That was, very similar, a 4-2 victory over an Edinburgh team with a last-minute breakaway goal. So there was certainly similarities, and I can tell you the Copeland cantilever was literally shaking on Sunday. So I'm just glad that they've pinned it on properly, because certainly since I moved up there, that's the best. That's the best I've experienced. Scott, the hero of the hour was Youssef Chermiti. A riddle wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a Rangers shirt, wrapped in £8 million. I mean, what do we make of this guy? He obviously missed a great chance against Motherwell. Not so much for me missing the chance, but not even hitting it straight at the goalkeeper. It feels sometimes that he's one of these guys that sees the goalkeeper right good strikers see the space either side of him. I mean, what do we make him? How do we get the best out of him?
I think the frustrating thing, Douglas, and you've touched on it there, it's the going from one extreme to the other. No, he was so poor at first part, not just in terms of the finish, but he wasn't involved in the game. No, his touch wasn't in, didn't get a lot of other chances, wasn't getting into great positions to score. You go for that to 4 days later, no, it looked like a world beater on Sunday. So that's the frustration. That's where the kind of enigma thing comes from. The only thing I'd say about, and I've been as critical of him as anybody this season, I probably need to hold my hands up because I'm guilty of this. I do think people forget how young Chermiti is. No, he's only 21 years old, which, because he comes with a big price tag and he comes from the Premier League, and because of the kind of whole hullabaloo over the signing, record signing since Torian de Flor, that kind of stuff, there's big pressure on him, quite rightly, and there's expectations, and Rangers fans expect an £8 million striker to come in, hit the ground running and score straight away. But he's 21 years old. I mean, he's still got so much development in him. You're talking about a boy that's not played a lot of football in the last couple of years before coming to Rangers, not scored a lot of goals. And the frustrating thing for me is that, and I don't want to hark back, but if Rangers had assigned, say, a Lawrence Shankland in the summer, an experienced striker, a free transfer, but an older head, a captain at Hearts, leadership skills, all the rest of it, signing somebody like that, to be alongside Chermiti and almost kind of aid his development and be the guy that you could rely on in goals while you were trying to make Chermiti better, I think that would have been an ideal scenario. Unfortunately for Chermiti, that hasn't happened. He's been pretty much the main man. I mean, you could argue Majowski should have contributed a lot more as well, but in essence, Chermiti's been the kind of main guy. And in actual fact, they've now went and signed another young striker, 22-year-old Nadiri, who is also developing as a player. They're still not that proper, experienced, older head, to kind of take a bit of the burden off. So I feel for Chermiti in that sense. There's clearly a player in there. I mean, he's turned up now for 2 massive games away to Celtic, home to Hearts, and produced the goods. He is raw, he's still rougher on the edges, but he's got something. You need to say he's probably worth persevering with, especially if he comes up with days like that. As I said earlier, I'd have probably just went with Nadiri up front because of what happened at Firth Park, but Danny Rohl knows a lot more than me. He's been keen to try and get the two up front. This kind of Leipzig system, I think, that he used to work with years ago, where they get the 2 strikers on the pitch, and it does. Rangers have toiled this season in terms of chance creation and obviously the amount of open play goals. There's no doubt that system and getting 2 players up top does help you with that. You see that on Sunday. Andy touched on just how quickly Rangers got back in the game after Hearts going ahead. Part of that is because they're getting bodies forward and getting guys in the box. So it probably suits Chermiti in that sense. And you just hope for his sake he can now kick on. I mean, he didn't quite do it after Parkhead. He's not scored that many goals since. I think he's only got 7 for the season now. But between now and the run-in, he's really got to try and replicate that performance on Sunday. And if he does, he'll stay in the team and Rangers have a right chance of the title.
Scott, did you just feel that the team was a lot less predictable in terms of how they played? I think at times they've had this kind of thing that's hampered a lot of the Rangers teams over the years, and just this horseshoe sort of going from one side to the next. And listen, Hearts came to play, which obviously made it for an open game and made it a really, a gripping spectacle. It was one of the best games I can remember for a long time. That says a lot, because I think the league this year has been a fairly compelling watch. But I just felt the Rangers having that box in midfield, Chukwani and Raskin doing the sort of ratting about and winning the ball back. You had the 2 sort of inverted 10s. You're never quite sure if they were going to go wide, if they were going to come inside, or vice versa. You had obviously the fullbacks going high, but crucially, I think the thing that really made it difficult for Hearts was Nadiri dropping in,
yep,
and Chermiti looking to spin behind. and I think it dragged them all over the shop at points. I mean, I just thought a Rangers team that have been pretty easy to work out for the majority of this season, and obviously been reliant upon flashes of brilliance or set pieces. For the first time, I actually look, that's a Rangers team that has got a bit of invention in it. It's got a bit of, just something different that teams are going to struggle to work that out. And as you say, Scott Volkson, who's yet really hit top form, if you can add him into his obvious qualities, if you can get him back to his best, you've got Mikey Moore forever just wanting the ball and wanting to run at players, then suddenly this is a team that's got a bit of menace about it.
Look at the first goal, Andy Douglas, just as an example. Romans plays a 1-2 with Moore, who's gone in field. Romans obviously goes in the overlap, puts in a brilliant ball. There's a striker in the box to get the first header. There's Mikey Moore following it up with the second one, and then you've got Nadiri falling in, not to force the OG. Bodies in the box, putting pressure on defenders. It feels like, I certainly feel you've not seen that type of goal enough for Rangers, especially maybe in second halves when you're chasing stuff. But in terms of first half, attacking that end, that goal felt to me like the goals Rangers used to score and should be scoring. Getting to the byline, the fullback producing quality, and there's bodies in the box. Not just to win the first ball, but the second ball as well, following it up. I definitely think the system, the formation helped with that, and that's obviously what Rohl is trying to create. It feels like, and we know for listening to him and at the press conferences, it feels like he's done the kind of first phase of the development in terms of making them harder to beat, more organised, more structured. He's I know they were a wee bit ropey in the first half, but it feels like he's kind of sorted them out defensively. He wants that next stage now where they look a real attacking threat, and he obviously feels if he can get Chermiti and Nadiri together up front in that system, then they can get that.
And another guy who impressed, Chermiti takes all the headlines, but the guy I'm really excited about is Romans. I thought he did an absolutely cracking game. I don't want to really start speaking ill of other guys in the squad, but it's just night and day for me from Makoma. It's quite rare, I think, for football fans to be excited over fullbacks unless you're buying James Tavernier again. But he really made a difference in terms of on the ball and off the ball. His physicality, a vast improvement.
I think that's the key to it. I mean, like Makoma, listen, I think we'll agree he's done a decent job given, his level of experience, given what he was thrown into. I think he's improved as the season's gone on. I still don't think it would be a bad shout to be asking the question of Brentford if you could have him back, to compete with Romans next season. But I definitely think you've seen a step up. And, I just think what you talked about there about his physicality, I think that has been the real noticeable thing. I think there's been times when opposition teams have targeted Makoma, thinking he's, while he's athletic and he can get up and down the pitch, he's not somebody who says strong physically. He can be bullied at times. You can outmuscle him. Nobody's outmuscling Joe Robbins from what we've seen so far. I mean, he's an absolute specimen. Him along with Chutwani, obviously playing in that left-hand side, has added a real physicality. But what impresses me is not just the sort of off the ball stuff. It's how clever and how smart and just how calm he is on the ball. Final third, he's not just lashing the crosses in aimlessly into the box. He's trying to pick somebody out. He's trying to play passes. He's trying to link up. I've spoken to a few people this week for a piece that I'm writing for tomorrow's paper, and they all speak about how, in Belgium they've got this. I don't know. It wasn't the word they used, but I might say it's almost a snobbery about what they're looking for in a young player. They all have to have perfect technique, and they all have to, be great in the ball and be eye-catching. It doesn't matter if you're a centre-back or a goalkeeper. You need to be able to dribble the length of the pitch and stick one in the top corner. And they forget about, the nuts and bolts of football that really are probably just as important, because if you lose the physical aspect of football, your technique can often be overcome. So I think that's what he brings. And I think he brings a maturity. And again, we're talking about a guy who's only 22. I mean, the way he plays the game is as if he's 35. He's just so unflustered. He's so calm in possession, and I really think, it's only 3 games. I mean, I think that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves about, is that it's only 3 games in, and the fans are already so excited. And for a guy who was probably of the 4 that came in January, the most unheralded almost, he was the guy that seemed to attract the least amount of headlines. He's been the one that the punters are really, really taken to the most. Must say, I thought Chutwani as well. It was absolutely terrific. I mean, it just has, again, sheer ability to dominate in the centre of the park on the ball. I think he's bold with his passing as well. I think he likes to play. I think it was his pass at Firth Park that led to the opening goal, where he's willing to pass forward with pace in the centre of the pitch. He did it again a couple of times on Sunday, and again, it's just that bravery. And I think that's at times that this Rangers team's lacked, is somebody being willing to take the risky pass. And it's, again, going back to the crowd, nobody likes to be booed, nobody likes to have jeers at them if you give the ball away. But to be honest, if Rangers are going to get to the levels they need guys that are brave enough to ignore the crowd. And as much as the crowd can lift you, when the crowd are maybe at their tetchiest, what Rangers need is players who just blank that out and forget about that. And I think Chotwani, from what we've seen so far, it can be one of those guys. Again, I think we all have to caveat this with Romans, with Chotwani, with Skov Olsen, with Nadiri. It's such a small sample size. They're 2 minutes in the door. There's a long way to go. We'll make our full judgments come the end of the season, but I think the fans are entirely right to be excited by what they've seen so far.
Just on Romans, Douglas, just quickly, I agree with Andy. The thing I really like about him is when he gets into that position to deliver, it's his decision making and his variation in the crosses. He gets his head up, he tries to pick someone out, he mixes it up. No, he's seen in Sunday, he goes with a kind of clip ball for Chermiti's header. There's been times where he's just fired it across the goal. There's times when he cuts it back for somebody. I think he did that a couple of times in his debut when he came on, when he got an assist. So I really like that variation. When he gets into a danger area, he doesn't panic. He lifts his head and actually makes something happen, as opposed to just putting an aimless cross in. So I think he's been really impressive so far.
I thought all 4 of the new signings played their part on Sunday, which maybe raises more questions about why more of them haven't started recently. But that's in the past, and we'll move on. But even Skov Olsen, who's been a wee bit quieter, showed his.
Again, I mean, we spoke about this last week. Skov Olsen hasn't played hardly any football over the last 3 months, so I think again, and there's been so many guys that this has been true of this season, that you really do have to cut them some slack. And I know that we as journalists have been asked to, give you instant, analysis and instant judgments on players, and the fans too will tend to do that as well. It is hard, but Skov Olsen needs time to get up to speed. We all need time to adjust to a new league, new pressures. I mean, even like Chutwani playing for a big club in Sturm Graz in Austria. Having been over there, the stadium is nothing like Ibrox, and the demands will be nothing like, the intensity will be nothing like Glasgow. Skov Olsen, having played for Bruges, big club in Belgium, and with their own demands. But again, I think the Old Firm, especially this season with Hearts been in there, the pressure levels, the scrutiny is another level up entirely. So that'll take time for them all to adjust to and settle into. And who knows where they're living? Maybe they're still living in a suitcase in a hotel at the moment. These things all play their part. They are human beings after all. But I think from what you've seen so far, the signs are just encouraging. And the more these guys get settled into life on the pitch at Rangers, off the pitch in Glasgow, then I think you'll see them really come to the fore and be the big signings that Rangers were hoping they would be.
And it'll have been good for them to see that atmosphere, Douglas, on Sunday, the new guys. Because let's be honest, they've maybe come in, the kind of crowd hasn't been great, probably. They've probably been looking about thinking, right, is this it kind of thing? But to actually see the way the crowd was, the way Ibrox was on Sunday, I think that'll have been good for them, just to appreciate, right, So this is what it's like when it's good. No, this is the response and the reaction you get when you put in a good performance, win a big game, give the crowd something to shout about. I think that'll do them the world of good ahead of the running.
I think you're right, Scott. So I was just going to say, because I remember speaking to Connor Goldson a couple of seasons back, and he's seen his fair shares ups and downs at Ibrox, and he admitted, Rangers can be a tough place to play when things aren't going right, but when they are going right, it can be the best place to play. And I think too many of the players have only seen Ibrox at its tetchiest, at its grumpiest. They've not lived the sort of intoxicating feel that the players say that went to Seville saw of Ibrox, the uplifting powers of it. And I think that penny should drop in with them now, that if you perform, if you give the fans something to really shout about, they'll propel you on further. If you go the other way, then it can be a really intimidating, difficult place to play your football, and it can limit you. I don't think there's any doubt that there's players in this squad and previous squads who have felt inhibited by Ibrox rather than lifted by it. But if you've got the big character, if you've got the big shoulders, they can cope with that. As I say, as I think Chutwani has shown already, and a couple others as well, then Ibrox can most definitely play its part certainly in the weeks to come.
Yeah, it was great to see the new guys do well. Obviously, old habits die hard, and we've still got that comedy goal against us. And I'll maybe just gloss over that. I don't want to end discussion on Sydney's game on a negative note, but it was another howler, which I'm sure will have Danny Rohl worried. There's not much a manager can really do about that. When you've got players turning their back on the ball and then someone inexplicably giving it to them.
Well, we'll say, but Fernandez obviously makes a mistake, but again, it's a fairly young player who's not come here without much experience. He's not made many of those since he got his run in the team. I mean, you're going to have to expect type of players that Rangers are signing, the money that they're paying. You're going to get guys that make the odd mistake. I would still think that Fernandez, on the whole, has looked a player of potential compared to some of the sort of suggestions that they were getting, when he signed from Peterborough, some of the Peterborough comments. I still think he's looked, he's done, on the balance, he's done a lot better than was suggested he would when he came up the road.
I think the past kind of 7 days have highlighted the rather schizophrenic nature at times of the Rangers support. We've gone from we're doomed on Wednesday night to just give us the trophy now in some sections on Sunday. I'm certainly not among them. There's still a long way to go. We've got a big game this weekend against a team who might be bottom of the league, but seem to have a habit of making it difficult for the Old Firm. We've had to rely on 2 late goals against them, and obviously during the last midweek, Celtic had to rely on another late goal to beat Livingston. Scott, I'm interested. Andy and I spoke last week about the kind of three across the middle against the 2 across the middle, and we went with 3 against Motherwell last week. We went with 2 on Sunday, which I think is correct to say that we did give us a much better attacking intent, and yet at the same time we did probably cede a bit more ground to Hearts than we've been used to at Ibrox in recent seasons. I think the concern is that after the Motherwell game is that maybe Danny Rohl goes back into that kind of almost self-preservation mode. And do you think he'll stick with that 2 in the middle, or do you think he'll go with 3? Well, the 3 certainly offers you more control of the game. The 2 maybe gives you better options going forward.
My gut feeling, Douglas, says he'll go with the 2 and try and get the 2 up front again. As you say, Livy, with all due respect, bottom of the league, haven't won in a long, long time. I think Danny Rohl will feel confident enough to go there with roughly the same team as Sunday, I would imagine. I mean, I don't see why you would make many changes. Maybe we're now in a period.
They have an eye on Old Firm game, though, because one of the reasons I think he put that team out against Motherwell was with one eye on Sunday. So is he maybe...
I think you've got a week between games now. Do you know what I mean? But we're now in a period where there's not a lot of midweek games, hardly any at all. So you should have a full week to prepare for each game. So I mean, I'm a bit old school that way. I don't see why you should be. It was frustrating actually to hear Danny Rohl talk after Fir Park about having one eye on the next game. I think when you're on a title running, you need to deal with the game that's in front of you and worry about the next one after that. I mean, managers are hypocritical at times. They tell you that they tell us every week that they only focus on the next game. You know what I mean? Just concentrating on the next game, and then after first part, say, "Oh no, I actually had one eye in the Hearts game." So, no, I think we're now at a stage, as I say. No, there's plenty of time between games. You pick your best team for each individual game. I think you need to almost ride the crest of the wave for Sunday and just keep that momentum going. Play roughly the same team. I certainly wouldn't make many changes. And I think against Livingston, he would actually want the two big strikers playing, to give you a real physical presence, put balls in the box, go and attack. I'd be amazed if Chukwueze doesn't start again, for instance, in the middle of the pitch. I mean, who knows? Listen, he might swap, like are asking for Diomande or something like that. He might swap Mikey Moore for Antman, might swap Sterling for Tavernier. There are a couple of the changes he could make just to freshen up a wee bit, but I think Sunday was just about his strongest team probably, and I'd be surprised if he deviates for that too much going to Livy. You should win the game, and to follow up Andy said earlier on, the crowd again should be massive on Sunday. You're filling the whole stadium pretty much. They can make it like a home game, and I would expect them to go and win it.
I thought was important on Sunday was the subs that Rohl could make. I mean, for the first time, really this season, you're looking at the strength of the bench and going, well, he's got options there. He can make guys that can come on. And I thought, like, you saw Gisama at his best when the game's a bit opened up. Hearts are obviously throwing bodies forward, desperately trying to get something back. And there's space for him to attack. I thought that's where he's at his best, when the space can really open his legs and he's not getting bogged down with 10 men behind the ball. Tavernier's experience coming on, Antman coming on and adding a freshness. I just thought, that makes sense to me. These guys, okay, they're maybe not the starters that they thought they might be at the start of the season, but they can definitely be the finishers. I mean, remember Eddie Jones, old England rugby coach, talking about that. They're not calling them subs anymore, they're finishers, and that's what Rangers needed, somebody to come on and help finish the game off. And Gisama did that with his running assist for Chermiti's hat-trick goal. So listen, if he does go the same, it's not to say that the guy's on the bench, and obviously I think Daniel spoke about this after the game, when he name-checked Gisama, that just because you're not starting a game doesn't mean you can't play a part. And I think that's what Rangers really need now, the guys on the bench to be, okay, you've been overlooked for the starting lineup, but you can still play a major part in the game coming off the bench later on.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the upcoming fixtures, I think Sunday is just so important. I think Hearts have got quite a favourable run, between now and the split. I think they've got 4 games at home and only 2 away from home against Livingston and Killie. Celtic are obviously probably in the driving seat, I think it's fair to say right now, given that game in hand. They've also closed the gap on Hearts, and we've obviously got an Old Firm game just around the corner. So it really, I mean, it's, and you touched earlier, it's unthinkable that Rangers could drop points on Sunday, and yet the question marks, I think, will remain until we have a game like Sunday that we do put to bed with relative ease, given the Hibs game. And I know Hibs and Motherwell, it's a different proposition from Livingston, but until we go to one of these tough away grounds during this run and get a result, I think those question marks might still remain.
Well, as you said, I mean, like Livingston, they took a late goal. It was Max Arns, wasn't it, earlier on in the season? So, I mean, listen, I don't think I've ever seen a good game of football at Livingston. I don't think I've ever seen a good game of football on any AstroTurf pitch, to be frank. They're a leveller, and that'll be the thing that Rangers have to overcome. As much as, Livingston team, that as much as they're poor, they're fighting for their lives. Okay, they don't have much of a chance, but you can bet that they're going to, go down fighting, they're going to go down swinging. So Rangers have to cope with that. They have to, they will have the added benefit, as we say, of having 3 sides of the ground, but, they're going to have to cope with a team that are going to be fully committed, that are going to be looking to make it as uncomfortable as possible. But again, as you say, if Rangers are going to be champions, these are exactly the tests they have to go and take care of. I think there is a big question mark over them, given the way the last few away games have gone. But then you can look back to Pittodrie, you look back to Celtic Park, those were tough tests as well, and Rangers get the job done. I think Danny Rohl is right to point out that in the long run, you might be able to look back at Fir Park, you might be able to look back at Easter Road and go, those were handy points. What I would say is that I think, Rangers have got 10 draws already this season. I think that is about as many as they can, as realistically they can handle. I think any more than that, again, you just start leaving the door open for the other two teams, especially as you say, what the real concern for Rangers is after the split. They're going to have to go to Celtic Park, they're going to have to go to Tynecastle. I think there'll be another third away trip somewhere else in there, maybe Fir Park, maybe Falkirk, perhaps even Easter Road. So there's, they've got a real testing, tricky run after the split, which means that they have to take maximum points get into it now. They can't afford any more slip-ups on the way through to game 33.
In terms of Sunday, Douglas, I know it's a cliche, but an early goal's crucial. See if you score early.
We've got one at Motherwell, and it didn't help us.
Well, I suppose, aye, that's true.
Second early goal then.
Nah, but I still think the early goal will be crucial on Sunday. If Rangers become stickier and stickier the longer it goes, if you can get in front, gives Livy more belief. Tension sets in, anxiety with the crowd. I definitely think if they score early, if they go on the attack, on the front foot, early doors, as I say, with the two strikers, and they can get themselves in front, it deflates the home team, gives obviously the Rangers fans a lift inside the ground. I think they'll be fine, especially if they score early. I think they'll go and win it fairly convincingly.
Yeah, hopefully. Just stands to reason it's a must win. It feels weird, a team fighting for the title, going to the bottom of the league, and the fans being nervous about it. I think given 15 years of scar tissue, I think we've every right to be nervous. But
I think these are the games that have always been crucial title run-ins because, as you say, Livy have got everything to play for themselves. It's not a dead rubber for them by any means. So, these are always the games that have to be ticked off, and the ones that if you try and look past them, as you say, to the Old Firm game next week, they're inevitably the ones that become a cropper in. So, listen, Rangers take care of business, and then you can look ahead to the Old Firm game and what a huge clash that will be.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have plenty to discuss again next week. Right, lads, I'll let you go. Thanks very much. Thanks also to our sponsors at NordVPN, and enjoy your football at the weekend, and we'll catch up again next week.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.